Okay, hello. Looks like we've got everyone here. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to start off with some opening remarks from the President of Hawaii State Teachers Association, Mr. Corey Rosenlee.
Hello, my name is Corey Rosenlee. I'm president of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. Before we begin, I just want to say thank you to all the senators, especially Senator Kidani, Senator De La Cruz in the House, Representative Luke, Representative Woodson, who have worked so hard on this one to make sure that we can support our keiki and support education in Hawaii. Right now, with the current budget, we are looking at potentially losing over 700 teachers in Hawaii and over 1,000 DOE employees due to layoffs. At the same time, we're looking at pay cuts of over 9% to all of our DOE employees. This will have a devastating impact to our schools and to our keiki. We know from what's projected, this could mean higher class sizes, a lot of programs being cut, and more importantly, it's just we cannot turn out the teachers that we need every single year to fill up the gap, and we already have a shortage of 1,000 teachers. If we do this on top of that, I deeply fear what it could be the long-term impact to our schools and to our keiki. Instead, the superintendent has suggested using federal stimulus money for tutors and for summer school, and it makes no sense to fire teachers and hire tutors. The money should be appropriated to make sure that we can keep as many of our teachers as possible. Over the next few weeks, and this is why it's so important to do this bill right now, over the next few weeks, teachers have been told that they do not have positions and that they may be laid off and they have to look other places. This could cause a mad scramble across the entire state if we cannot assure teachers and the schools that this funding will happen as soon as possible, and that the Board of Education and DOE needs to act as soon as possible. So we appreciate all the legislators in putting this forward bill, and we hope that it will pass as soon as possible, or that the Board of Education will take action to make sure that we can keep our teachers and make sure that we provide our keikis the schools they deserve.
Thank you, President Rosenlee. At this time, we will now be moving on to Senator Michelle Kidani, Chair of the Committee on Education, to hear more about this bill.
Aloha. Senate Bill 270 and House Bill 613 will appropriate $104 million in fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23 with the purpose of offsetting budget reductions to personnel who are employed at the school level. The bill specifically targets budget reductions that would have resulted in layoffs, furloughs, or pay reductions. The money will be released to the Department of Education after the Board of Education and Superintendent certify that they agree to the uses of the funds as outlined in these bills. Because there are concerns that proposals by the Department of Education does not prioritize the needs of our students, House Bill 613 and Senate Bill 270 ensures and directs the federal ESSER funding to ensure that our students can count on having the necessary school staff there to welcome them back to campus. It's about focusing on our students' achievements and success to get our students back on track. We have seen from school financial plans that the personnel to be cut include critical staff like teachers, school counselors, one-on-one special education staff, and janitorial staff. These are critical positions to addressing the needs of our students. And if we want to get them back on track, we need to make sure that these positions are filled. Mahalo.
Thank you. Bottom line, what we are saying is that for any money that comes down from the federal government, that we want to prioritize those funds to protect teacher employment. Because if we protect teacher employment, ultimately we are protecting our keiki future. And the bill allows the state legislature to have a formal role in that very important discussion.
Thank you, Representative Woodson. At this time, we will take any questions from media. I'm going to hand it off to Jacob Akey, Senate Director of Communications.
Thank you. So we can open it up to questions now. If you do have a question, please raise your virtual hand and we will call on you. Susan?
Thank you. I understand the priority. I was just curious about the process. It's federal money that is issued, from what I understand, to the state, typically to the Department of Education and overseen by the Board of Education. This is unusual to have the legislature directing how that money could be spent. Can you elaborate on the authority to do so and the normal flow of that sort of money? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. As you just articulated, normally in this type of situation, if there is any type of federal relief funds, what happens is that funds go to the lead educational agency or the state educational agency, which of course, in the case of Hawaii, is one and the same. Fundamentally, we are just not in agreement with how the federal funds are planned to be spent. And so what we are saying is, like it was mentioned, it does not make any sense in our minds to spend money on substitute teachers if in fact you're talking about laying off teachers, because the number one thing that impacts learning in kids is our teachers. So we are not in agreement with how we're going to spend the funds. And so for this unique circumstance, that is definitely unorthodox, but it is historic, that we're saying that we want to have a direct role in how we spend these funds.
Thank you, Rep. Senator, did you have any comment?
Yes, in the first round of CARES monies that was provided, the legislature, did allocate the funds. And so I think we've set the precedent to allow us again to direct how the federal funds will be used.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Aloha, I have two questions. Well, one question, when will you think the funds will be decided on what they'll be allocated for? And the second one is for President Corey Rosenlee. Do you have a special message for your Kauai readers?
So maybe we'll take the first part of that. Senator or Rep, did you want to take a stab at that?
I believe that we will be hearing it in the Senate on next Wednesday afternoon at 3:00 p.m.
And so, thank you, Senator. And so for the House, we're going to hear the proposal on Tuesday. We have it on our 2:00 agenda.
Thank you. And Mr. Rosenlee, what main message would you like the educators on Kauai to know?
For Kauai, we've always had sometimes a hard time keeping teachers. And it's not something that quickly can be replaced. We've already heard from teachers across the state that when they're looking at layoffs, they're just going to leave teaching. And so the long-term impact, especially for a place like Kauai, is if these teachers leave, we know it's really hard to replace them. And so I think what this bill does, it ensures our teachers that they have positions, and it's going to do its best to avoid these pay cuts as well. And I think by that message, I think the long-term impact is going to make sure that these kids in Kauai and across the state actually have teachers.
Mahalo.
Thank you. I see that Darryl has his hand raised. Darryl?
Yeah, thank you. My question is are the money committees on board with this already? So will it pretty much for sure go through? And two, are there any strings attached? The way I'm reading this.
Oh, sorry, Darryl. I think you muted.
Okay, so did you hear my question about the?
No, you kind of cut off. Sorry.
Okay, so you know what? Hold on a second. I'm going to turn off the scanner. Have the money committees agreed to this plan? And number two, I just want to understand. So the main string that's attached is that the DOE gets this money. It cannot hire tutors or lay off teachers. Is that the way of putting it?
Oh,
They have to, they will have to keep the same level of funding for the teachers that they now had. And that's also basically part of the federal requirement, Daryl.
yes, again, there is in fact a maintenance of effort provision in the ESSER 2 fund. So already that's something to be considered. As was explained, the bill says that you need to prioritize educators and make sure that you're spending any money from the federal government on that first before you go on and have other considerations. As per the money chairs, we are having discussions with them. Of course, this bill, as all bills, will go through the normal legislative process. And so it will be referred to the Committee on Education and then Committee on Finance in the House and the Committee on Education and then Ways and Means in the Senate. And again, it'll go through the traditional process and have the formal discussions.
Senator Kidani, is that the same situation in the Senate? I know you guys have a little bit more, you guys talk a little bit more than they do in the House.
Yes, and you know, there may be some tweaks that need to be made, but I have already spoken with the Chair Donovan Dela Cruz, and he agrees that, you know, the point that we need to is make sure our students get back on track, and we can't do that if we don't, you know, retain our teachers. And so that's really what is the driving force behind this, is to get our students back on track. We know that some of them have been underachieving, and, you know, due to the pandemic, it's been very difficult on our students, particularly the younger students. And this is our way of hearing, you know, in responding to those students and their parents and some of our teachers too, that we have taken to heart the need for their teachers to come back on board and be ready to accept them when we bring them back to school.
And finally, you folks have had a couple of hearings at least with DOE. To actually propose this legislation indicates a real lack of trust that the DOE is going to do the right thing when it gets this money. Is that your feeling, like the DOE can't be trusted to make this decision themselves?
Well, if anyone has paid attention to some of the board meetings, the Finance and Infrastructure Committee, I believe it was last week, Thursday, you know, could not get the superintendent to respond to some of their questions, and they actually deferred hearing the, well, they tried to defer their meeting that was, the issues that were scheduled on that general board meeting that day. So whether or not they believe the superintendent has answered their questions, I think is something that you're going to have to ask them.
Yeah, and it's not really a question of trust or not trust. It's just a question of whether or not the legislature will be intimately involved in this process. And that's what we desire.
And
Thanks,
I'll
Rhett.
just add, at the last Board of Education meeting, I think it was pretty clear from the Board of Education members that their priority was taking care of their people and that they wanted to do all they could to avoid layoffs as well.
Corey, can I ask, what is the last proposal that was made by DOE, as far as you know, is in regards to teachers versus tutors?
Well, the governor has said, you know, he's looking at 2 furlough days a month, or he proposed to our teachers a 9.23% pay cut. He was looking to cut our additional pay for 21 hours and bonuses for probationary teachers staying on. And that was on top of all the layoffs as well. The stimulus funding, as the senator and representative were talking about, basically says, though, that in agreement for taking the stimulus money, the priority is number one, to be able to keep your employees in the same pay and to avoid layoffs. And so, I think the legislature is just trying to make sure that these provisions are enforced.
Audrey?
Yes, hello. So Governor, I think this is a question for President Rosenlee, but Governor Ige recently said he would reduce the proposed budget cut for the DOE to 2.5%, about 2.5% from 10%. Are the job loss and pay cut estimate numbers that you provided, are those based on a 2.5% budget reduction?
Okay, little number time here. So the schools were asked to cut their budget based on a 10% reduction, which is based on $164 million. But the DOE was actually cut $264 million from their base budget. So the replacement of $123 million still meant that schools were looking at $141 million loss. So it went from approximately 800 teachers losing their positions to somewhere around 700 teachers losing their positions. So the amount that came back still is not nearly sufficient, not only to abide by federal law and the stimulus bill, but also just to make schools whole when it comes to the amount of positions they potentially could lose.
Thanks. Susan?
So following up on that, you were pointing out that the base budget had been cut previously, the current base budget by an extra $100 million. So that's how you went from, got it up to the 264. That leads to my question, whether Senator and Representative can say that the ledge is committed to restoring that 100 million that was cut from the current base budget. And, separately from using this ESSER money. Because when that cut was made, it was, I think, supposed to be a one-time thing.
Yeah, Susan, I can't respond to that right now. That's one of the things that we're still looking at, and I have to work with the Ways and Means Chair on that. We have not looked at or decided on every issue, so that still needs to have some work done on it. Thank you.
Similarly, we are working. So just like the Senate, the House works in tandem with our money committees. And so we were having those discussions, but ultimately that will be the money committees that make that decision. Of course, we are in favor of restoring that $100.2 million. If you add it to the $164 million that was proposed at first, which is now 41, that is a significant cut. And so we have a significant hole in our budget as it relates to the Department of Education. And we need to do everything that we can to fill that hole, because ultimately it comes down to our kids. And I think that's really what we all need to be focused on. It's about the kids, and how do we do what we can to protect our kids' future.
And if Susan, I'll just add on to this. Right now with President Biden's stimulus plan, the $1.9 trillion plan, it's including $130 billion for K through 12 schools across the country. And so I think we're all watching to see what happens with that. But the reason why we cannot wait for that potential stimulus money before we start taking action now is that teachers are already being told right now about their job losses. And so we need to really, stop the dam from leaking here, and as immediately as possible, make sure that that money gets to the schools so that the principals and the teachers and other DOE employees know that they have jobs next year.
Thanks. Suvan?
Hi. So can you please clarify either lawmaker that this $104 million would just preserve all the teacher positions currently that are existing, and it would not result in any layoffs or furloughs, that it would negate the need for that?
it would help. That $104 million figure is the amount of monies combined that is not allocated. And so again, we still have some runway to cover to get to where we need to. I want to go back to what Chairman or President Rosenlee had mentioned. We are all watching what's happening up in Congress, because that $130 billion, if in fact we use the same formula as was allocated before for Hawaii, that means maybe about $440 million that would come down to the Department of Education. And so again, the legislature wants to have some direct conversations if that funding is actually approved by the federal government.
Thanks. Anyone have any last minute questions? If not, thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Uh,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.